just start out with your name and
Okay.
your association with the neighborhood?
Yeah, my name is Paula Scott-Frantz, and I am the daughter of Paul Scott and Ruby Holiday Scott, and the niece of Mrs. Nettie Scott King and her husband. And they were Nettie Scott King and her husband Thomas were the owners of King and King Funeral Home, which was this way, about a block or so. I'm not quite sure where we are, but it was very close to where this building is now. It was a funeral home, and so that means that they actually took care of people after they died, and it was a really sort of a big impact on my life and on my brothers' lives. So when we were little, we got to I won't say play with things from the funeral home, but they were part of our lives, and it wasn't weird. So, like we would go visit my Aunt Nettie, who lived above the funeral home, and she had this really neat kind of atmosphere. It was a business on the bottom floor, but when you go up the stairs and into her house, you entered into this other world. And so she had this door, which was very Art Nouveau. And I'm an artist, so you guys might hear some art terms. I also teach a lot of kids and adults art. So she had this door, and as I was saying, it was Art Nouveau, which means it was very kind of swirly, and it was kind of a salmon pink color. And I loved opening that door because it had a great big like arch oval and glass, so that you saw through into her world like it was a whole different place, which was really, really neat. So I'd open that door and I'd go inside. The first thing I'd do was run to the sugar bowl, because she had she had traveled all over the world. And in Hong Kong, she had bought this enormous mirror that had all these different sections in it. And she would keep her tea set right under that. And there was this huge bowl of sugar. So I would go, every time I visited her, that was the first thing my brothers and I did, was we'd get the sugar tongs and we'd pull out some sugar that was in different shapes, like hearts and flowers and stuff. We'd pop them in our mouths. And if she was upstairs, the first thing I'd hear was, "Paula, are you eating that sugar?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm eating the sugar." She says, "Well, it'll ruin your teeth." So it was really, she was, I don't know how to describe her. She's very Victorian. She literally was born in the 1900s, and so was my dad. So they were very Victorian. They were very kind and compassionate, but they were also had some real strictness about who they were and who they wanted us to be. So we were, I don't know, we learned a lot about family honor and how to be honorable, not just to our parents, but to each other, because we did fight, like kids will fight. But that was always brought back to us about being respectful to my brothers and them being respectful to us. My dad would say, "You boys must take care of your sister." And so they were like, I loved it because they were a lot taller than me as we grew up. And so I felt like I had these two oak trees following me around sometimes and keeping me safe. That was a very cool feeling.
I was just going to ask, so the house was converted into a funeral home, correct?
That's what I believe. Yeah, I think it was there, and then I know that parts were built onto it. Probably her apartment was built onto it, and it was, like I said, it was a different atmosphere. Downstairs was the business, and it was all blue. I remember it being lots of different shades of blue and soft and very calm colors. And my Aunt Nettie was the first person you'd see when you went into the funeral home, and she had her desk, and she was like the receptionist, but she was more than that. She was like this calming presence. because everyone that goes to a funeral home is usually very sad. So she would be the person that would greet them, and they would come and sit with her, and she would calm them down, give them some water, talk to them about their life and about what happened. She was really neat and very good at that. She could calm you in an instant. It was something that I really enjoyed seeing her do. And other memories are of just when I was 12, or probably more like 13 or so, my father started thinking that we needed to be more serious about going into the business. And by then we had already figured out I wanted to be an artist, my brothers wanted to be musicians, and we were not interested in going into the business. And one of the major reasons was the sadness. It did affect us to see people be that hurt all the time. And I had told my mom at a younger age, like around 9 or something, that I didn't like having to see people cry all the time. And I knew that Aunt Nettie was good at calming them down, and my dad was good at talking to them, but that didn't stop how those people felt. And I became very empathetic when seeing all of that. And I didn't want that in my life every day. And that was very hard for us to get our parents to understand, because they had been doing it for so long, and it was a family business that had been going at that point for 30 some years or more. So I did, for a short time, I was a receptionist, and I wasn't very good at it. So basically I would take phone calls and I'd make appointments, and I tried to do, my best at it, but my heart just wasn't in it. I was sitting there doodling, thinking up my next drawing and my next painting, and it didn't work. So my brother Paul did go into the business for a while, and I don't know, I guess I should describe more about how this looked. So he was a driver of one of the cars, and he would help the families be seated, and he would also play music.
This is your father?
This is my brother Paul.
Your brother Paul.
Yeah.
Was your father named Paul?
Yes. And all three of us had the same initials, PRS. So my father's name was Paul Robinson Scott Sr., or Paul Robinson Scott, because he was named after his father, who was Paul Robinson Scott Sr. It was crazy. So my brother was Paul Robinson Scott Jr., and I was Paula Ruby Scott. But the Ruby was my mother's name. Mm-hmm. So the cars were, my dad had a Cadillac. They were all Cadillacs. My dad had his Cadillac, which was his car in the procession of the funeral. You have a procession. His was the major car. Aunt Nettie was the second car, which was so sporty. And it was like, she was just a character. She wanted the sportier version. So she would have it was a shorter car, but it was always a sportier version. And then the hearse, the flower car, the families would be in the next car. So it was a real procession that would go down the street. And my brother was one of the drivers of that. He also became one of the people who would play music. And during the Vietnam War, because we all took music, I took piano and cello, and Paul took trumpet. And during the Vietnam War, he was the person who played taps for all the boys that came home and had died. And that really started to change everything as far as us thinking about going into the business, about life. We weren't allowed to play with guns. I mean, like bang, bang, shoot 'em up when we were little. If we did that, we got in huge trouble, because my dad said, when you die, you're gone. And laying down and playing dead is nothing to play at. And it was a real eye-opener. So he would not allow us to play we had cap guns and things like that, but he would not allow us to play with guns anymore. So, and that was kind of weird because he was a big hunter. And in the 50s and 40s, men liked to go hunting, and he went to Canada all the time when he could, and he went hunting. So, as one of my friends has mentioned, when she was over at her house, she would see coyotes on the wall, and deers on the wall, and bears on the floor. These are bear rugs. And a lot of times those animals were kind of disturbing. Even to us, we were like, wow, that coyote's eyes are following me. And because they had these glass eyes, and they still do, and they would follow you around the room. So we didn't like hunting. And I remember once my dad had described why he would never hunt again. And all of this has to tie into how it felt to be around the funeral home business, how it felt to see people sad and see families lose people. So he said he would never hunt again once he was in Canada. And it was a full moon, and he had his sight set on a deer. And the deer moved just like a movie into the full moon. And the full moon was behind the deer, and he saw the silhouette of the deer in his sights. And he said, I just dropped my rifle, and I thought, what am I doing? I could never create anything that beautiful. And so, so he never hunted again. I was so glad.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Creation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, not that he was that religious, because he went to church every day, because he was with a funeral every day. So that was not something he wanted to do on Sundays. So, but he did go to New Bethel Church, and that was a Baptist church. But my mom was a Methodist. So we went to a Methodist church, which was Scott's Methodist Church, which is not too far from here. It's still there. And everybody always thought that was very odd that he didn't go to the same church we went to. And my mom said, he's in church every day. Believe me, he gets the word, he gets the message. And on Sundays was just about the only time he had to relax. So a little bit about that. To be honest, my dad wanted to be a farmer, and he wanted to be a rancher. And at 2253 Hillside was 4 acres of an urban farm. And that's how I grew up. I grew up on a farm. So we had chickens, turkeys, sheep. We had 2 steers. We had a giant hog in the barn, which my dad built. He built the barn with a friend. Rabbits, dogs, and maybe a cat. He didn't like cats, so we didn't have too many cats. But all of that was at different stages. And this was because in the 50s, there wasn't a big law against having animals. And now people can have chickens in the city, but you used to be able to have anything in the city, even horses. So.
Was that common? Like, did you have other neighbors that also?
Yeah, not that many, but our neighbors all had a lot of chickens on the north side of us. And several streets over, there was a man who had a horse, and he was like an old junk guy who would come down the street at night, and you would hear his clip clop coming down the street. And he was actually looking for scraps and things, and I used to love that sound on summer nights. That was such a neat sound. So we didn't have all those animals all at once, but we did have them within a period of maybe 15 years or so. One story that I love to tell about that, and this is my dad's getting ready for work, and he's shaving, and we all had our duties that we had to do, and Paul and Stevie took care of things outdoors. So Paul went out to look at the garden and make sure the garden's okay, and to throw the garbage in our little compost. And the garden was really big. It was bigger than this room. And it fed us, actually. My mom was good at canning and things like that. We worked a lot. It was a farm.
Seems to. When you're first coming in.
Yeah, we did. We worked a lot. So Paul comes running back, and this is when we had 2 steers. The steers are cows. And I know how this sounds, but El Toro was the name of one steer, and I know that means the bull, okay, but he was a bull. So El Toro was one steer, and Ferdinand was the other. And Paul comes running back in the house, and he says, El Toro's in the garden. And this was a big deal because El Toro was like as big as this table almost, and he was like, at the shoulders, he was like 5 feet high. He was gigantic. He was very, very sweet and gentle, but he had these horns. And it was a scary thought that he's not in his half-acre plot anymore. Somebody had forgotten or let him out, and I still this day don't know how that happened. So my dad's got shaving cream on, and he's getting ready to get ready to go to a funeral, and we're eating, my brothers and I, Stevie and I are eating oatmeal, and we're watching Captain Kangaroo. and Paul comes running in and says, El Toro's in the garden, and I just heard everything crash in the house, and they went running out, and my dad's trying to get him to go back, and El Toro's like, moo! He's like, no, I'm not, I'm free, I'm eating cabbage, are you kidding? So he's eating this cabbage and not just Purina cow chow or whatever we used to give him. So he won't go back. And my dad gets on the phone and he calls the old guy who's got the horse and the junk man.
Yeah.
He calls him because he knows that he's part Native American, and he knows that his nephew is visiting him, and his nephew has a horse. So he calls him and asks, can your nephew come with your horse and help me get El Toro back into his place? And the guy must have said yes, because in about 15 minutes, a cowboy comes running up our driveway on his horse. He is the neatest looking guy I've ever seen. And he's got on a cowboy hat, he's got a lariat, which is the rope, and he's on a pinto. And a pinto is a black, in this case, was a black and white quarter horse. And he's like riding up our driveway. Well, this is Indianapolis. and this is like 1961 or something. And he jumps off his horse and he grabs his lariat and he's swinging his lariat like this, and he ties it around his saddle, the horn of his saddle, and he digs in and he's pulling on El Toro, and El Toro has never been touched in a way like that before, and all of a sudden he just takes off. And he's and I'm like, oh my gosh. And Stevie runs in the house. I said, where are you going? He came back with his Roy Rogers hat on and his cap guns, and he's firing the cap guns. And I said, stop it, you're gonna make El Toro go crazy. Well, the next thing I know, the cowboy is running towards us behind El Toro, and he's still got it on around his horns with the lariat. My dad is getting the car ready so we can chase him, and he puts a wagon behind the car that we used to get all the leaves in so that we can try to get El Toro back where he belongs. And I see the cowboy coming right for our door, and it's El Toro coming right for a door. He's just, I just felt so bad for him because he's so scared. So he's coming towards our door. Stevie's going bang, 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 bang. I'm going, shut up, will you please shut up? And I see Paul and my mom, and it's just like chaos. And they're coming right for me. And I'm like holding the door. I'm going, ah. And the last moment, the cowboy grabs his horns and turns him like you might have seen in rodeos. And he turns El Toro away from the door, and they go from on the patio down this little stairway, and the stairway is, there's a barbecue pit with a marble top, and it's very sharp right here. And there's not more than this, like 3 feet between this and stairs, and went to the upstairs. And El Toro and the cowboy squeezed through that. And when they were on the other side, going down towards the street, there was just this big streak of blood on the edge. And I realized the cowboy got really hurt. There wasn't enough room, and he got squeezed and cut from the side of the barbecue. So off they go down hillside, and they wound up on Fall Creek. And the next day it was in the newspaper, and it was in its column called "Did You Notice?" A cowboy jumping on top of cars with a lariat trying to capture a steer on Fall Creek. And so they got him, they brought him back and put him back in El Toro. He was all sweaty and upset. And so my mom tells the cowboy to please come back in, and I'll try to help you. And he goes, "Thank you, ma'am, I will, thank you." And he had this he just sounded just like straight out of a movie. And so she bandaged him, and she said, "I can't do anything with this, you need to go to hospital." And he goes, "Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, I sure will." So I'm going, "Oh, he's so cute." Well, I was a kid, you know.
Yeah. It's hard to even imagine a cow in Fall Creek.
Yeah, it was. He was there. So anyway, so we're all, trying to calm down, and my mom says, "Well, are you ready to go to school?" And I'm like, "Oh, what? We can't going to school now. We're all traumatized." I'd do anything to get out of going to school. So no, you're going to school. I think they needed a minute. So my dad's finishing up. He's shaving. He's getting ready to go back to the funeral home to do the funeral, and my mom. He dropped us off, and my mom is like at home trying to calm down. So I think it's a great idea to just tell this story to my teacher. So I just stand up and I'm telling the story, and she told me that I was a prevaricator. Prevaricator means that you are not telling the truth. It's a polite way of saying you're lying. I got so upset. And I just sat down in a daze. And when I went home, I told my mom, and she said, "Really?" And she grabbed the paper. And she said, "You take this article. No, you take this whole paper back to school tomorrow." So I did. And Mrs. whatever her name, Swan or whatever her name was, she read it. And she was like, "Really? Oh." And I said, "Yeah, I don't tell lies." And I was precocious, yeah.
Why? You were telling the truth.
I was telling the truth,
Right.
the absolute truth. And reality is really amazing. Sometimes it's really strange. So
What school did you go to?
I went to school 38. And 38, I thought I recognized the people.
Stigger, you probably heard of the Stigger.
Yes.
I'm a Stigger.
All right. Did you have a brother Andrew? Or Andrew? Or, okay.
Well, my uncle was
Okay, that could be, yeah.
tall and Forrest and all.
Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah, so there's several people here who I went to school with.
Yeah. What was School 38 like?
38 was, I loved School 38, and it looked a lot like your average school of that time period, but I loved it, and I was one of the first black children to go to School 38, and I knew it. And so when I stepped into that first day of kindergarten, I realized that I was probably the only black kid in the whole school. And my mom was there with me, and she was talking to the teacher, and Mrs. Alney, who was like an angel. And she did reassure my mom that she would watch out for me, and she said, "These kids are really little, and we're going to make sure they all get along." And I loved kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was, do you think, due to your teacher, you said?
Pardon?
That was due to your teacher?
It was mostly due to my teacher and to one of the young girls who was there, because I was starting to cry. And this little girl named Nikki Hamilton came right up to me, grabbed my hand and said, "Don't cry, let's go play in the kitchen." Because they had these little play kitchens that you could, learn how to cook. And so that's how it was for many years. Yeah, it was a good school. And that's where I learned that I really wanted to do art. But getting back to the funeral home, let's see. One of the most dramatic things that happened was on Halloween of 1963. And we had been out, trick-or-treating. We had all our great costumes on, and we came back and we had masses of candy and these, I think we had pillow sacks full of candy. I have two of these stories. And we were looking at our candy and divvying it up and went to bed. And then I heard, late that night, I heard boom.
Oh.
And I thought, what is that? That's not right. And then the phone starts ringing, and it doesn't stop ringing. And then my dad, who my parents are still up, my dad gets in the ambulance, which all the cars are parked up at our house. He gets in the ambulance and down he goes, down the drive, out the drive to the right. And he never went north. He always went to the funeral home, which was to the left, which was south. And all of a sudden I got really scared, and I thought something has happened. Well, that was the night that Holiday on Ice had been performing at the Coliseum. And the Holiday on Ice was like this ice show with lots of performers on ice, and they would do all kinds of performances. And a boiler blew up that night, and it was underneath the stands, and almost 81 people were killed. And my dad and every single funeral director in town was called to bring their ambulances, because there weren't enough ambulances, and to take the people who had died to their funeral homes, because the city morgue couldn't hold them all. And that also really got us, my brothers and I, to see my dad have to do that. He didn't come home until the morning. And I think it was like a Thursday or something. And again, we had to go to school. But for years, I would not go to the fairgrounds, and I wouldn't go to the Coliseum. I went back years later when I was a teenager, just because I think my mom didn't want me to be scared anymore, because I really was scared of that place. So.
Was it common for funeral homes to have ambulances?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, because there were no ambulance services when I grew up. Not really. There might be from a hospital, maybe, but they didn't want to come to black neighborhoods either. So we had our own ambulance in the garage, but that was because of the funeral home would go to pick up bodies and deceased people from homes or from hospitals, and so you had your own ambulance. So that was why we had one. Another ambulance story. I have three, but this one is a story about anger, and the anger that I felt when my brother would tease me sometimes. And we were small, like, I don't know, 8, 9. And he would tease me, he would grab something, and Paul and Stevie, my two brothers, they could run like the wind, and I never could catch them. I never could. And so he would grab, I had this red umbrella that I loved, and I would play, around the house. I loved to play dress up and stuff. And I don't know why, but one day Paul just decided he was going to grab my umbrella. So he grabs it from me and he takes off running. And I said, you, blah, 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 blah. And he starts running, and he's running through the kitchen, and it's summertime. And so the doors are open, but the screen door was locked. And the screen door had closed. Running, and he's trying to push it open, but he doesn't push it open. He runs through the glass. and the glass cut his face. And my brother was incredibly handsome, and he got his face cut here, and all I remember is seeing red, just the red patio, painted red, the red umbrella on the red patio, and him with his face. And he was just laying there crying. And my mom heard it, and she immediately rushed in, and she said, "What are you children doing?" And I remember thinking, first aid, we need first aid. I remember her pressing her hand to his face and saying, "Call an ambulance," and call a hospital. But then I had to get a phone book and find the hospital, and I was too little, but she couldn't leave him. Yeah. And I said, "I'll go get the first aid book," and she goes, "It's too late for that." And the way she said that, it just cut right through me, because I realized if I hadn't been chasing him, maybe it wouldn't have happened. So I got very guilty. So she's putting compress on him. At this point, my mom doesn't drive. She finds the keys to the ambulance, and she says, "You children," meaning me and Stevie, "you children behave yourself while I'm gone." And the reason she's doing this is because the hospitals wouldn't always accept you if you were black. And right before that, a little boy had died right in front, got hit by a car, and right in front of Methodist Hospital, right in front of it. And Methodist Hospital, when they brought him in, they said, "We don't have facilities for Negroes." They had to take him to General Hospital at that time, which is Wishard, and he died on the way. And so my parents were very protective of us, and that's why we had things like, we're going to have an ambulance. So we had an ambulance. My mom gets in it. She doesn't have a driver's license, but she takes Paul to Wishard, where they stitched him, and she was very angry at the way they stitched him, because they just kind of stitched him instead of getting a plastic surgeon, which is what would happen now. They would call the plastic surgeon on duty to stitch your face so that it won't leave a scar. Well, it left a scar. And I remember for years and years, not every time I'd see Paul, but sometimes I'd see Paul, and I'd look at the scar and I'd think, I did that. And that's not true, that wasn't true, but that's how I felt. And the scar remained on his face until he was probably in his 50s, and then it was, kind of gone. But that day I felt so bad that I did something that you should never do. And that was while they were gone to the hospital, I felt so bad that I took my arm and I took it under the glass, the jagged glass, and I cut myself on purpose. And I've still got those 2 little scars there. And I did it because I thought, I will never, ever be that angry again, because look at what anger does. And I'm a little kid thinking these thoughts. But all of this comes back to us because of the business my parents and aunt and uncle were in. And I'm thinking, it was a lot. It was a lot. We grew up very aware of a lot. Mm-hmm.
Seen a lot of
Yeah.
trauma in a lot of ways
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know your aunt and uncle were very involved in their community,
Mhm.
the NAACP, the Garveyite movement. So 2 questions. Did your parents also share that community involvement? And
Yes.
secondly, what do you remember about
Yes.
your family?
Yes. Well, my mother did it in her own way, which was to create the first Black Girl Scout troop in Indiana. So myself and Norma were 2 of the first Black Girl Scouts in Indiana. That was a big deal. That was a very big deal, because everywhere you went, this is the late 50s, early 60s, if you even just went to get your uniform, it was a big deal. Who are you? What are you doing here? That kind of attitude. But my mom and a lot of moms then were really brave. They were very courageous about making sure that their little girls and little boys had part of the world, that they were not afraid to go out into the world once they started to grow up. The things I saw my dad do were, instead of charging people what he should have charged them, he didn't charge them what they should have been charged for a funeral. He would allow them to pay and pay and pay just as they could. And he would come home and he would ask us, do you children have, where are your old clothes? And where are your old shoes? And he would make me go in this little cabinet, or it's like a little place underneath the stairs. Just think Harry Potter under the stairs. That's what it was. I go under the stairs and I get out the old shoes and the old, which were all in really good shape, and some of them I could still wear. But he said, "Now, you children have everything. You children, I just came from a place where these children barely had shoes, and that's where these things are going." So that happened on a regular basis, giving food and clothing and money to people who needed it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2253 Hillside.
Yes. Yes, that's where we used to live.
2449.
Oh, okay.
There's supposed to be some kids in y'all.
Oh, all right.
Y'all had a great big, I was trying to sit up
On the hill.
here.
Yes.
I have not forgotten.
Oh, thank you for remembering.
Talking about that the other day. You know, Bill Lee,
Yeah.
we were just talking about it.
I should put an ad on in a paper. Anybody who remembers,
Yeah.
come meet me here.
So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I know, like,
Y'all was the rich one in the neighborhood.
Well, it was a funeral home.
so I know your aunt was involved with a lot of the school committee and stuff like that. Do you remember anything about Aunt Nettie's?
All I remember is that when she was very involved with so many different organizations, and people really looked to her to be a driving force, and she was. But you have to remember, my take on this is from the take of a small child to a teenager. So I was always very proud of her, and I learned a lot from her about how to be with people and how to have compassion and be patient with people. Yeah.
You hear a lot of memories about Thomas King as well. I know he was a Thomas King, like your husband.
He died the year I was born.
Yeah.
So I don't. I've seen pictures of him, but I never, if I met him, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But
Like,
yeah.
how did your family talk about him?
He was, really, it was mostly Aunt Nettie that talked about him. She missed him after he passed away. He was really also very involved in making the community, helping people, making sure that organizations were running smoothly. I remember once there was this, I think it had to do with the school board, in which one of the school board members that was black, they would not replace him with a black person. And so she got very upset and said that, and so they created their own version of this school board. But she resigned, and I remember her sitting around the kitchen table, and she and my dad and my mom talking about it. And I was pretty young, but I understood what they were talking about, and she just wanted to quit. She said, "I'm not going to be a token, and I'm not going," and they needed to, token means that she didn't want to be the only black person who was in this organization who had actually no power. And so they talked about it, and they talked about how she should approach everybody and tell them that she's leaving and all of that. But that was one of the first times, and maybe the only time I saw her that angry. She was just really done with trying to get those people to do what was right, and that school board to do what was right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see, what else can I take?
Well, growing up, like, you went to school, I know you mentioned you were a receptionist for a little bit, like, so kind of what other ways do you remember being around the funeral?
And the other ways were just day to day, like going in and sitting. I did a lot of observation, and I still observe things, and I didn't realize I was that way. But what I do is I go somewhere, anywhere, and I just start looking at things, and people are talking to me, and I'm going, yeah, and I'm interested in what they're saying, but I'm actually observing. And so I would do that at the funeral home, and I think that's part of why I became an artist, was I loved sitting in the cool, calm blue room where they would have funerals, because to me it was just part of life. It wasn't a funeral home, really. It was just it's where my dad worked and where Aunt Nettie was, and the sugar cubes upstairs. And it was sad, but it wasn't like it was if you're going into a place for the reason of having a funeral. So it was a very different view. I remember when they built add-ons inside the building, and how Aunt Nettie had a lot to do with how things looked, and how when we got the cars and the whole caravan, how she actually created the colors for the cars. So it was like a navy blue bottom and this kind of baby blue top, which nobody had ever seen before, and those were custom colors. So if there was a scratch on the car, which sometimes there was when it got parked incorrectly, my dad had to take the car and they insisted on charging him to spray the whole car again, and not just, there's a lot of little things like that you never think of when you think of a business, especially this kind of business.
What's your favorite color? Blue?
Actually, it's one of my favorite colors.
Yeah, I was wondering if the blue is.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite colors. And when I think of my dad and my mom, how hard they worked to make it a successful business, and it was. And when my mother was pregnant with me, there was this ordinance or something that came out about funeral homes having to have more than one licensed embalmer. And my mom was not an embalmer, and she was not really a funeral director, but someone else in the business had to become an embalmer and had to go to a funeral, an embalming college. And so it was my mom, and she's pregnant with me, and she's at an embalming college, learning all this anatomy and chemistry and all this stuff, and she did it. And she did not go to college. And at that time you did not have to go to college, but you did have to go to an embalmer's college. So she went and she learned all these things, and her plaque was up on the wall next to all the other people who ran the business. And that was quite something for her to actually learn those things with just a high school education, and learn things that were not necessarily that pleasant, but the thing that happened was she taught us all that stuff. Not how to embalm, but she taught us anatomy, the parts of the body. She told us what happens when you don't eat right, what that looks like inside your body, because she had seen all that stuff. It was really interesting. And so when I go to a doctor and I say, oh, my so-and-so is really hurting, or this is wrong with my toe, I know that it's not broken, but blah, blah, blah. And they'll go, well, how do you know it's not broken? And I said, well, because so-and-so and it's not broken. And, that's because my mom told me about bones. So, yeah. The other way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but the other way they were involved in community was, my mom saw that she felt like she had to do something else besides Girl Scouts. And as I got older and wasn't able to do Girl Scouts anymore because of school, she ran for the president of the PTA at my school, and she got it. And that was huge because black women were not head of anything at that time. So everyone voted for her to be, yeah, and that was neat because they knew if Mrs. Scott was head of the PTA, things would get done and organized, and there would be, you know, some interesting people coming to visit, and so yeah, that was another thing that was. And all those things were kind of scary. You know, she was not a real outgoing person. People really liked her, but she was actually very quiet and kind of reserved. But as far as making a difference goes, she really wanted to do something that made a difference.
What year was that? Do you remember?
What year was she? Well, I know it was 64. It was when the Beatles came out, which was 65. And so it was around 64.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do you feel like the, you know, community, Martindale, like responded to King? I feel like I hear a lot of people now talk about, my grandparents.
It was beloved.
Yeah.
It was beloved. It really was.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with Aunt Nettie and her attitude towards people. It was just a special place. And they made it look like a little castle, King and Kings. And, and so the top of it actually had like a little turret roof. And then it had these real thick glass cubes in the side when they remodeled it, which also helped it look like a little castle. But I always got the feeling that people felt really warm and welcomed and seen when they went there. And that was a big deal then. And that was part of the reason they liked to just go say hi to Mrs. King, say hi to Aunt Nettie. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long, did your dad and Aunt Nettie continue?
Well, they actually had a funeral home before they came here. So they were originally from Pennsylvania, and Chester, Pennsylvania, I believe. And they had a funeral home there, and that was probably in the 20s. And then in the 30s, by the 30s, they were here. But that one burned down, the one that was in Chester, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Yeah.
that the reason why they moved here?
I think it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they decided to come somewhere new, and they started a business here.
So what happened to, can you talk about what the property is currently and kind of what happened to it?
Where I grew up, yeah. The house where I grew up,
Do you mean her house or the funeral?
or the funeral home. The funeral home is still there, I believe. And it's, no, it's not? Has it gone? Ah.
I didn't know what it is.
Yeah, because I looked it up and, see, don't believe what Google says. Okay, so, if you do look it up, I think it's 1503 Columbia, used to be. And if,
I have a picture.
Oh, good.
Probably long after the time that your family left, but I do have a picture if the students would like to visualize.
yeah, that would be
what it looked
great.
like. I know 2 years ago, Indiana Landmarks tried to save the building, but there was just too much maintenance and so forth, and they were unsuccessful. But if you'd like, I'd like to show it to you first because
Thank
it
you.
may have changed a lot, but I'm sure.
Oh,
that-
yeah, that's a side view.
Does that look-
That's where we built on.
Okay.
And this is where the families would come out and get into the car, get into the cars. And around here where you see the limestone, that's where it was more like a castle. And still online there is a picture of it, of the front, and you can see how it looked like a castle with Aunt Nettie's apartment on top.
Yeah, I have seen, I think, one of those photos before.
But we're talking, this was we're talking a span of almost a century.
Yeah, for sure.
So things are just not there
Yeah,
anymore.
definitely were. Yeah. So where did you go to high school?
I went to Arsenal Tech.
Okay.
I went to Tech, and I went to IUPUI to college.
Did you study art?
I didn't, because my uncle Joseph Holliday was a wonderful artist.
No, you're good. I just heard it.
That's okay. My uncle Joseph Holliday was a wonderful artist here in Indianapolis, and he was like a surrealistic, real painter. I wanted to paint like him, and I would ask him for tips, and he always said he was going to help me to paint like him, but I knew very early that that was a skill that not everybody could have, no matter how hard you tried. So I went in another direction with art. And I loved going to Tech, but I was very quiet. They would call me Mrs. Spock because I was just so cold and you could not approach me. And most of that was because I just got treated differently. Oh, your father's Paul Scott. Well, I'm not going to date you, that kind of thing.
Being the daughter of a funeral home director.
Yeah, and your dad's a funeral, and so I just, okay, fine, whatever. I'm just going to go read Arthur C. Clarke. I don't care what you think. So I just became this lone wolf in high school. Yeah. But I did learn to play cello. And I'm pointing to Norma because Norma played cello. And I did sing in choir. I did do art in high school, but I did not decide I wanted to go into art until I was in college.
And what main mediums do you do?
Now I am a felt maker, and I have been for 26 years. So if you go to Kukula's Felt online, it's a Facebook page. You can see the classes I teach and the types of art that I make, which is all felt making, which is wool into felt. Hi. Kukla''S Felt, Kukula's Felt Facebook page. Kukula is my nickname.
How did you get that nickname?
My husband gave it to me on the steps of IUPUI. Because for some reason I reminded him, there were these little puppets I love puppets, and there was these little puppets in the 1950s, a puppet show called Kukula, Fran, and Ollie. And for some reason, I don't know why, I reminded him of the little puppet called Kukula, which actually means, in many languages, it means little girl. But Kukula was this really brave little puppet. And for some reason, he thought I was brave. I don't know. But yeah, it stuck.
Yeah. So when did your dad retire from?
He never retired.
Okay.
He never retired. He wanted desperately for us to leave America. And so he had contacts in Guadalajara, Mexico. He had taken a lot of our money and put it in Mexican banks. And this is during 1968 with the riots and after Martin Luther King got killed. And he was just done. Yeah. And he said, I want my children to grow up in a place where they're free and they can be who they really are, which he didn't get to because my grandfather was a slave. So I'm 70, I'll be 75 next month. And my grandfather, like you've got a grandfather? Well, I mean, age difference. But my grandfather, if you think about your grandfather, my grandfather was a slave. And he became a funeral director. So I'm thinking that's how it happened on my dad's side of the family. And it was way back when they would have horse-drawn carriages and horse-drawn hearses. and the men all had top hats and that sort of thing. And I've only seen a couple of pictures of that happen. What was the question? I'm sorry, I went
Just
off.
like, when did your dad stop?
Yeah, he
Or,
did
you know,
not.
he just,
He did not. And I was talking about putting money in Mexico. And we went down there, and we lived down there for a little while in the summer of, I think it was 68, and we loved it. And people were very kind to us. And my mom and my brother spoke Spanish, so we got along really well. And I didn't want to go at first. We were all very much against it. And the more we were there, the more we loved it. It was just so colorful, and the music and the people, and they were kind to us. They were not, you know, it wasn't what you think. It was beyond what we know, because it's a whole nother culture. So I was, by the end of the trip, I was ready to move. But then my mom got very ill, and she got cancer and passed away. And after that, everything changed. So I think it was 4 years later, my dad also got cancer. He had a brain tumor, and he passed away. So
sorry.
yeah, between my mom and my dad, almost except for a couple of aunts and uncles, everyone died of cancer.
Yeah.
Between 72 and 76. All my adult relatives, except for like 2, your mom, my Aunt Betty, and my Uncle Joe, everyone died.
Wow.
And some of them died the same week. So it was, we figured out that it was probably had to do, they grew up in Gary, Indiana, and they grew up very near the steel mills, and we thought that it was an environmental thing, because they were all about the same age. So I'm actually well, Aunt Nettie was 87 when she passed away, so, but right now I'm the oldest of all of those people. So yeah. So that was another big life changer,
Yes.
you know.
And so then the funeral home switched hands.
I tried to run it
Okay.
for, I think, about a year. But that's when the decline was coming, and my dad had died, my mom had died. I had no one to advise me. I kept feeling like the people who worked there, they knew a lot, but they really, I don't know, we were not getting along. So I decided to let go. I decided if I don't let go of this, I'm not doing the job. I'm sort of pretending to do the job, and I'm getting things done, but I don't see any growth happening here for the business. And things were starting to pile up, like taxes that were not being recorded, and it was just the end, and I knew it was the end.
Yeah.
So I let go and tried to create my own life.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
And it was it Stewart Mortuary, or do you know who came after?
I don't know who definitely came after. There were 3 different owners.
Yes, I think.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there were 3 different owners who tried to make a go of it. But they couldn't really, because they didn't have the connection to the neighborhood. I was just remembering how the interstate just really cut off everything. So when they brought the interstate through, there was this whole community to the south here of stores and houses, and you know, that was part of that whole circle around King and King. And they just bulldozed it because they wanted to bring in the interstate. And the interstate was like right over there. You could see the cars passing by. And it was no longer this like, almost like a village, this little area.
Yeah.
The bakery and Polk's Milk and cleaners and all that stuff were, you know, they went out of business, a lot of them, so yeah.
I know we're sort of running out of time. I guess, what are some of the things you would want people to remember about the King family, the Scott family, your legacy, your parents' legacy.
Yeah, I'm so happy to just have this opportunity to just talk about this because being almost 75, and I realize that a lot of people will not remember any of this. And it feels very weird at a certain point in your life to know that those things are like, they're in the mist, they're fading away. And unless there's pictures and people writing about it and talking about it, or getting the opportunity to tell the stories, it's gonna fade away. So I hope that people can remember that being kind to strangers is a big deal. It changes people's lives. So no matter who the person is, how they look, where they come from, how different they are from you, I would say my Aunt Nettie welcomed those people to her, you know, and by the end of it, she was always holding somebody, always, and not just because they were sad, but because they were so grateful for her kindness. So kindness to people who are different than you, strangers who need help. It's like I don't know, it's almost like a Buddhist thought. You help someone who is of need, and you're giving without trying to get something back. And that's what I do remember. And the protection that they gave their kids, us, was enormous.
Yeah.
That was, yeah. So kindness, protection of your loved ones, and following your own dream. Even if it's not your parents' dream.
So that you're an artist still, and you got to pursue
Yeah,
this.
yeah, I work at the art museum a lot. I give private classes, and I've worked all over the state, and I've given lots and lots of workshops to corporations, and you name it. But yeah.
Well,
Thank
we all
you.
give a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty. And sharing also some of the hard things about
Yeah.
the work.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to interrupt. Well, it was so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I told about an inch. I told about this much.
I got a couple of questions that I want to take one time. When was King first card? I missed that. Year the first card.
Here,
Yeah.
I think it was 31. Right? Yeah, I think.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it was 31.
That's the first one.
Uh-huh.
All right, I'll write that in my notes. In 1970, 71, I believe it was the first Indianapolis Black Expo.
Yeah.
The very first one. I think I was 10 years old when my dad took me to it. And we walked through, and I saw this beautiful artwork. I met
Oh, from Joseph Holliday?
Yes.
Yes, my uncle, yeah. That's our uncle.
So is Jan your cousin?
Yes.
And she's got a sister, I can't remember her name.
Sandy?
Yes.
Yes.
So I met them later on down the road. And it's just such a beautiful thing to serve life.
Yeah.
He inspired me to become an artist also.
Really? Oh, wonderful.
That
Wonderful.
was my inspiration.
Well, he did inspire a lot of people to take up the brush. Yeah, he did. Uh-huh. You're welcome.
Well, feel free to hang around and ask questions.